Good afternoon, friends, and thank you very much for coming to this interaction today. As is usual, I will begin with a few announcements, and then I have here with me on my left Joint Secretary Americas, Mr. Vikram Daraiswamy, who will be making his debut with you in terms of interacting in his present responsibility. And on my right is Director Americas, Ms. Nandini, who will be there to assist Mr. Daraiswamy in case you have some very, very specific questions, since she handles Canada also. With that, let me make the couple of announcements that I have. The first is about the visit of the External Affairs Minister to the ASEM Summit in Vientiane. The External Affairs Minister, Shri Salman Khurshid, will lead the Indian delegation to the 9th Summit of the Asia-Europe meeting in Vientiane on 5th and 6th of November. In the course of his participation at the summit, he will be speaking on a couple of issues. In one of the sessions, he will speak on global issues, and in another session, he will speak on the future direction of the ASEM. The ASEM, as you know, is a dialogue forum of 46 member states and 2 international organizations, and that is the ASEAN Secretariat and the European Commission. It was set up in 1996, and India joined the ASEM in 2007. It is our understanding that at present ASEM represents approximately 60% of the world's population, 50% of the global GDP, and 60% of world trade. At the culmination of the summit, it is expected that the Vientiane Declaration on Strengthening Partnership for Peace and Development will be issued. And there will also be a chair statement on the 9th ASEAN Summit. As is usual on such occasions, the External Affairs Minister will also have various bilateral meetings, and we are in the process of analyzing those. In addition, as I have another announcement to make, and that is that the Prime Minister of Canada, His Excellency Mr. Stephen Harper, will pay a state visit to India from the 4th to the 9th of November. He will be accompanied by his wife, Miss Laureen Harper. Mr. Harper will be visiting New Delhi, Agra, Chandigarh, and Bengaluru. He is accompanied by 3 ministers. During his official engagements in New Delhi, apart from meetings with the Prime Minister, he will call on the President and the Vice President. We will also have meetings with the President of the UPA and the Leader of the Opposition and Minister of State, Srimati Praneeth Kaur, will follow. With that, I will now ask my colleague, Joint Secretary Americas, Mr. Vikram Daraiswamy, to speak to you on the visit of Prime Minister Harper, and consequent to that, the floor is open for questions. As usual, we will begin with questions on Canada, and after that, you have a free-for-all. With that, I ask Vikram to speak to you. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for your time and your attention. Thank you, sir, for your introduction. You already have an approximation of the program, the main highlights of the program of Prime Minister Harper's visit. We have a press release out with a little fact sheet that we've put together for your information on the snapshot of, so basically a little snapshot of the India-Canada relationship. It gives you statistics on trade, investment, sectors of interest, something that we hope will give you a little background, a little flavor of the relationship. What I would like to say, however, is what you won't find in the fact sheet, which is essentially this, that this is Prime Minister Harper's 2nd visit in 3 years. This is his first state visit, of course. He was here almost exactly 3 years to the day ago. November 2009, he visited India last. It is part of what we see as a strong effort on the part of the 2 countries to re-engage, to to engage much more closely. Prime Minister Harper's 2009 visit was preceded by the visit of Prime Minister Paul Martin in 2005 and Prime Minister Chrétien in 2003. So we have, in the space of about a decade, we have had, this will be the fourth visit from Canada to India. Prime Minister Manmohan Singh visited Canada in 2010 for the G20 summit. A bilateral segment of the visit was bookended for that visit. Some of you may have gone on that visit too. So on both sides, we see a strong desire to re-engage and to take the relationship to another level. We have, of course, the highlights of the relationship being a strong economic and commercial partnership. We are looking at ways of enhancing bilateral trade, which is currently at around $5 billion all told. This is a net growth of about 28% of the previous year. This is good growth, but not at the speed that the two prime ministers had expected. So efforts are on to find ways of stepping this up. We would look at ways using this visit as an opportunity to bookend more functional mechanisms to identify specific areas of trade in which we can take matters forward. Investment has been an area in which significant growth has happened in terms of bilateral investment. India's investment in Canada is quite a bit larger than Canada's investment in India. All told, investment is of the order of $14 billion from India to Canada. Canadian investment in India, historically that is at about just under the $5 billion mark, US dollars that is, not Canadian. It's about 4.8 or so. In 2010 alone, we had over $6 billion in Indian investment in Canada. Key sectors of interest for us include energy, of course. We see Canada as an important and potentially critical partner for India in the energy sector. We are looking, of course, at agriculture as an important part of the partnership. You will find in your fact sheet that Canada is an important provider of pulses and lentils and peas to the Indian agricultural sector. Current agricultural trade figures are at 490 million in terms of imports by India and 167 million in terms of exports from India to Canada. We are looking at ways in which we can more substantively engage Canada's agricultural economy. Canada is, of course, an agricultural superpower, so obviously it makes sense for us to have a much more detailed and multi-layered engagement with Canada in that sector. But apart from that, there is also, of course, education. Canadian universities are among the best in the world. There is already a significant flow of Indian students studying in Canada. We have currently an estimate of about 23,000 students studying in Canada per year. We want to look at ways of building and expanding this relationship. Mining is another area of great interest. Canada, because of its strong history as a strong natural resource producing country, Canadian mining in terms of technology is among the world leaders. We are obviously, we could do with a lot more cooperation in the mining sector. Technology. We have an excellent partnership already ongoing for several decades between Canada and our Department of Science and Technology. We're looking at ways of trying to take this partnership forward in terms of identifying more and new sectors of technology partnership, in particular nanotechnology, in advanced materials, and biotechnology. Finally, of course, there is a vibrant link of Canadians of Indian origin. We have about estimates of a bit over 1 million people of Indian origin in Canada. This, in population, in percentage terms, is about 3% of the total population of Canada. So it's in ethnic terms, it means it's the second largest ethnicity in Canada. So yes, we are looking at a number of mechanisms that take our partnership forward. Some of this is captured in the stuff that we have already prepared for you. So we look forward to using this visit as a means of taking the relationship forward and building upon what we see as a strong desire on the part of Canada also to engage much more closely with India. I don't think I have much more to say as an opening set of remarks. I'm more than happy to address any questions subject to my knowing the answers. Thank you.
Yes, Sandeep, please speak into the mics. We'll just wait on.
Sir, considering the travails of Petronas and CNOOC, both of them are SOEs, what is our strategy to gain energy resources from Canada, whether we want them from SOEs or we are pushing private sector forward, and whether our SOEs match the transparency norms that Canada wants?
Thank you for that question. I think the answer to that is, well, it's really an answer that, quite fairly speaking, should be given by a Canadian official rather than by me. But as far as we understand Canada's investment laws, the net benefit test is applied insofar as majority stakes are concerned. In other words, if you have a company that is seeking to access natural resources in Canada and to buy out a stake, it must be if it falls within the benchmark of a majority stake. In other words, if it's under 50%, then you don't need to have this test assessed. If it is over 50%, it's a different matter. Now, I really can't comment why the Petronas deal fell through, the Petronas Nexen deal fell through, but this really is a matter for Government of Canada to answer. But insofar as our strategies are concerned, OVL is very interested. They have an office opened up in Calgary as of July this year. We believe our bids will be good ones, professional bids. I've had personally a discussion with the people at OVL. I think they're very seized with the Canadian government's approach to investment, and it isn't as if the Canadian government doesn't want investment in these sectors. They are welcome and open to investment. But I think in their system, it all depends on what triggers the regulations within their own system. So while it isn't for me to defend or in any other way comment on their system, I think it's very clear from what they've put out that they've set a fairly transparent set of mechanisms in place. And I don't believe that OVL in any sense is a non-transparent holding. Just to add a point to that, the bid that OVL has made, at least in one of the two areas that they're looking at, is a consortium of 3 state-owned companies. But as you know, OVL, at least ONGC, has also now about 30+% of its holding is not purely in state hands. Thanks.
Manish?
Vikram, what is the status of civil nuclear negotiations between the two countries? Do we expect a deal by the time the Prime Minister comes during the visit? That's number one. And
one question only. This is standard as you know.
We can talk whatever other questions. We're happy to take it offline after this. But thank you. That's an important question. As you know, we signed a bilateral civil nuclear agreement in 2010. We think it was an important moment in our bilateral relationship. I think the quality of India-Canada cooperation has significantly changed as a result of that, and as a result of Canada's support for the India-specific safeguards agreement at the IAEA prior to the 2010 agreement. So obviously there is a qualitative movement on both sides to engage. The specificities and modalities of getting the cooperation operationalized are being discussed. We hope to have forward movement on this in time for Prime Minister Harper's visit. Naturally, it would be improper for me to comment on exactly where we stand at this particular juncture, but we would be very happy if this comes through. I think both governments feel that this is an area in which we can cooperate. You are, of course, aware of this scale of uranium resources in Canada, and Canada's long and very sort of well put together systems in management of strategic resources like uranium. So any cooperation that has to be done will be done within the framework of our international commitments, in particular the India-specific safeguards agreement, the bilateral India-Canada nuclear cooperation agreement, and of course Canadian law and the IAEA rules. So within that, the sort of 4 corners that I've just spelled out, whatever we can exactly nail down, we hope to be able to do something. Thank you.
Yeah, Vikram. Actually, there had been complaints against Canada about giving shelter to separatist elements that they had been for long. Has there been any forward movement on this trade? And do you expect anything more on this?
Well, I think the history of this particular issue is well known. I don't need to comment on this. The fact of the matter is that it has been an issue of significant concern to the government of India. It has been raised for now decades. In particular since 1985, since the tragedy of Kanishka. But we have had an excellent response from the government of Canada. You are of course aware of Foreign Minister Baird's visit here in September. He made a very specific and very clear-cut, in our view, denunciation of such activity. And we feel that the kind of cooperation we're getting from Canada has significantly improved. It is, of course, a matter of concern for us, and we do continue to be in dialogue with the government of Canada on this issue. But we also recognize that Canada's cooperation with us has to be within the limits of Canadian law, and also within the limits of, within the sort of parameters of their commitments to cooperate against extremism and terrorism.
So Venkatnarayan.
I was surprised to find a large number of Indian doctors driving taxis in Vancouver. That's because I understand Canada does not recognize the Indian medical degrees. I think this is terrible. What is the government of India doing about it?
We are actually working towards a new strategy on cooperation and education. One of the outcomes of this would be recognition of degrees. Professional degrees, of course, is a more complicated matter, and you would be, it would be fair only to recognize that this is not the only country in the world where this happens, in terms of having extremely qualified immigrants from India doing jobs that, say, if I were to understate it a bit, not exactly within the limits of their qualifications. If that were to be the case, getting this done in a manner in which needs and capacities are matched better requires a certain level of comfort between the regulatory institutions on both sides. That is an ongoing process. Canada's interest in engaging with us in education is quite strong, and we recognize that it is also in our interest, given Canada's highly competent educational institutions. But the movement of people is always a complicated issue in today's world, as you know, particularly skilled people, because of issues of job displacement. So managing this within the two sort of contending ends of migration policies and educational recognition of degrees is always a complex balancing act. But we've been encouraged by Canada's willingness to talk to us on issues of this sort. So let's see where this dialogue goes further.
Are there any pending security issues, for instance, BlackBerry? Is it a pending issue, or is BlackBerry something which is behind it?
The dialogue vis-a-vis BlackBerry was not directly raised with the government of Canada. It is a major private sector operator, and the dialogue is whatever dialogue happens between their entity in India and the Home Ministry is happening in direct channels with the company. I'm not aware of whether there are further issues that the Home Ministry requires to raise with them at this stage.
I see that it's determined as exhausted. Yes, Rajiv, of course.